Okay. So I'm Inez Pryor. On behalf of the City of Dayton, I would like to welcome you all and thank you beforehand for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend the City of Dayton's virtual Pretreatment Advisory Group meeting. This Pretreatment Advisory Group meeting, or PAG meeting as they're more commonly known as, will include introductions of the current staff, the status of water and sewer rates, special monitoring rates, and extra strength surcharge. We'll also present the latest local limits technical justification and proposed local limits, and finally, updates and changes to the program. Following this presentation, there will be a question and answer session. Excuse me. First of all, I'd like to introduce all the members of the Industrial Monitoring Group and Industrial Pretreatment Office. Our group includes 3 industrial monitoring technicians or sewer system surveillance technicians. This is a frontline staff that you're most likely to see most often as they're responsible for conducting the city's monitoring activities at your respective industries. The staff members are Mark Herbert, Bill Haynes, and Phil Boyd. The industrial pretreatment coordinators for the city are Inez Pryor and Andrea Moore. We're responsible for the implementation of the city's sewer use ordinance, inspections of your facilities, maintenance of user records and monitoring data, and keeping abreast of regulatory changes and interpretation of local, state, and federal regulations, as well as the implementation of the regulatory requirements. Also, the City of Dayton's Division of Water Reclamation's manager is Chris Clark, and the city's Director of Water is Michael Powell. I wanted to touch on a short description of the City of Dayton's water reclamation facility. We are a 72 million gallon per day advanced activated sludge treatment facility. The city is regulated and permitted by the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, the Regional Air Pollution Control Agency, RAPCA, is the air pollution agency which regulates and permits the plant's air emissions. The City of Dayton's wastewater treatment plant discharges to the Great Miami River. More facts about our program specifically. The city currently has 37 significant industrial users in the program, 27 of which are considered categorical industrial users. There are also 12 industries that we currently monitor for extra strength wastewater discharges. We'll now have an overview of the city's rates for water and sewer, the special monitoring fees for permitted industries, and surcharge fees for treatment of extra strength wastewater. I'd like to please forgive the very small print in the slide. I know it's very hard to see. However, the first picture shows the water and sewer rates for 2023. Inflationary rate increases are necessary to ensure adequate revenues are available to cover personnel, operation, and maintenance and capital costs for all water department services. Water and sewer rates are set by ordinance adopted by City Commission. As of 2023, there was a water rate increase of 9% and a sewer rate increase of 7.5%. In determining the special monitoring fees for permitted industries, the city separates significant industrial users into 3 categories. Categorical dischargers, those dischargers which are subject to categorical standards like those under 40 CFR 433 or 464 regulations. There's also non-categorical dischargers, metals, and non-categorical dischargers, non-metals, or the non-metals, which are those discharges which are permitted under other standards such as volume of processed wastewater discharged, hydraulic and or organic loading. Then there's zero discharge permittees, which are permitted due to their which are permitted due to their categorical designation. However, they do not discharge the processed wastewater, but have other means of disposal. Special monitoring fees are determined by a base fee and the volume of wastewater discharged to the collection system. The base fee is based on the cost of sampling, analyses as required, inspections, and equipment and training. The volume charged is based upon the wastewater volume in 100 cubic feet. For example, a categorical industry with a volume of 10,000 cubic feet per quarter, which is roughly 83,000 gallons per day, would have a special monitoring fee determined each quarter. The base fee for this year is $1,978.02. A volume charge for this year is $0.0548 per 100 cubic feet. The base fee and the volume charge would total $2,526.02 for the quarter. Assuming there's a constant volume discharged throughout the year, this equals out to a little over $10,000 per year. For special monitoring fee, if there's any questions about the water billing, please contact the City of Dayton's water utility billing at 937-333-3550. If your facility is billed for water by Montgomery County, please contact Montgomery County's customer service accounts and billing at 937-781-2688. And also, if you notice, if your special monitoring fees are not being billed at all, or the fees or do not appear to be correct, then please contact the industrial pretreatment office to get that taken care of. Okay, now to go on to extra strength surcharge. The purpose of the extra strength surcharge is to cover the cost of treating extra strength wastewater discharged into the City of Dayton sewer system. If a business discharges wastewater that has more pollutants in it than the average domestic wastewater generates, then the business pays for the additional cost of cleaning or treating that extra strength wastewater. Extra strength wastewater is defined as having concentrations greater than the average domestic strength waste for biochemical oxygen demand and/or total suspended solids. For the City of Dayton, the levels at which wastewater is considered an extra strength wastewater is for a BOD concentration of greater than 350 milligrams per liter and/or a total suspended solids TSS concentration greater than 350 milligrams per liter. The industrial pretreatment program personnel perform monitoring at businesses determined to be surchargeable. This monitoring is used to determine the extra strength charge. The formula is used to determine the rate for extra strength surcharge for BOD and TSS are listed. In simple terms, the rate is determined by a cost per 100 cubic foot volume multiplied by the industry's average concentration of either BOD and/or TSS minus the domestic average concentration of BOD or TSS, which for both is 350 milligrams per liter, as stated before. This is multiplied by the industry's total flow for the quarter in 1,000 cubic feet. The city's method of calculating surcharge and the parameters evaluated for extra strength wastewater have not been reviewed for over 3 decades. The city has hired a consultant to reevaluate the extra strength parameters and surcharge cost. This evaluation is anticipated to be completed by February 2024. The implementation is subject to approval by the City Commission. As more information becomes available, it will be provided to industrial users in the future. On an annual basis, the City of Piqua Utilities Department prepares a comparative rate survey for water and sewer for 65 jurisdictions in Ohio. As of March 1st, 2023, the combined water and sewer cost is $224, which is the sixth lowest cost in the area. Now we'll move on to the local limits updates, which is probably the reason most of you are joining into this meeting. I'll give some background on what local limits for the POTW are, why they're required to be updated, how the limits have been changed for each pollutant of concern, and how this may affect individual permits. The City of Dayton is required to evaluate local limits to attain compliance with the NPDES permit. In short, local limits are defined as limitations developed for pollutants of concern which entered the publicly owned treatment works or POTW, which may interfere with the operation of the POTW, pass through, be incompatible with, or limit the wastewater or sludge use options. In order to achieve this, we must develop and enforce technically based limits. Historical compliance with NPDES permit, treatment efficiency, water quality of the receiving water, sludge disposal regulations, and worker health and safety are considered. The technical justification includes POTW flows, background concentrations, industrial flows, removal efficiencies of the POTW, the maximum allowable headworks loading of the pollutants, the method of allocation, and supporting data, assumptions, and methodologies. The pollutants of concern for the technical justification include arsenic, cadmium, copper, free cyanide, lead, mercury, molybdenum, nickel, selenium, silver, and zinc. There may be required technical justification for other pollutants of concern to protect the plant from pass-through and interference. The city received a new NPDES permit with an effective date of May 1st, 2022. The General Pretreatment Regulations 40 CFR Part 403 requires that every POTW develop and implement local limits to protect their treatment plant, the sewer system, biosolids, and receiving water from adverse impacts from industrial and commercial dischargers. POTWs develop and enforce local limits based upon the maximum loading of pollutants that can be accepted by the treatment facilities. These limits are initially developed by POTWs as a prerequisite to pretreatment program approval and are periodically reassessed to ensure that they are adequately protecting the environment from any adverse effects related to non-domestic discharges and to each specific treatment facility. As part of the local limits development, the city must maintain a sampling program to characterize an industrial and residential and commercial contributory pollutant sources entering the treatment plant. Removal efficiencies at specific plant locations and across the entire POTW are also determined. Specific criteria for regulatory and process type limitations are identified, compared in order to find out which is the most stringent factor in determining a limitation for a pollutant of concern or a local limit. For the EPA, the city is required to consider NPDES permit discharge limitations, the POTW's biological process inhibition, sludge disposal, water quality standards, and collection system protections. The City of Dayton considered several factors in this determination. One criterion examined is the prevention of pass-through of wastewaters that enter the water of the U.S. from a POTW in quantities or concentrations that alone or with waters from other sources either causes a violation of any requirement of our NPDES permit or increase the magnitude or duration of a violation of the NPDES permit. These include using NPDES daily or monthly effluent limits and chronic and acute water quality standards as necessary. Another criterion is considering the limiting factor for interference with the plant of wastewaters that alone or with discharges from other sources inhibit or disrupt a POTW, its treatment process and operations, its sludge process, use or disposal, therefore causing a violation of the permit. These include looking at the inhibition levels of pollutants at primary removal, activated sludge nitrification inhibition, secondary removal, the trickling filter inhibition, anaerobic digestion and anaerobic digestion inhibition levels. Criteria for limitation associated with sludge use for land application and the protection of the collection system from deterioration and health and safety concerns were also considered. With all of these limiting criteria, local limits specific to the City of Dayton's water reclamation facility were developed. We'll now compare the current limits to the proposed local limits. This is the complete list of the City of Dayton's local limits developed. We'll detail the changes for each specific pollutant of concern shortly, but first we'll detail how and why changes occur. Changes may occur due to an increase or decrease in the number and type or type of commercial or industrial users. Changes may also occur due to an increase or a decrease in the domestic sources contributions. POTW upgrades may also cause a change. Changes in the NPDES permitted limits, changes in the NPDES or sludge limits, and changes in POTW pollutant removal efficiencies may also affect the local limits developed. Please note that on this table, red indicates that there is a lowering of the limit from the current limits that we are now using. Blue indicates an increase of the limit. Limiting criteria. First, we'll start with the proposed limit for arsenic. The proposed limit for arsenic is 3.34 milligrams per liter. The limiting criterion at the plant is based on inhibition of anaerobic digestion at the wastewater facility. Although this is reduced from the previous limit of 8.995 milligrams per liter, there have been no industrial users that have exceeded this limit based upon a 5-year file review. For cadmium, the proposed limit is 1.91 milligrams per liter. The limiting criterion at the plant is based on the 503 sludge regulations. This has been reduced from the previous limit of 9.82 milligrams per liter. There was only one industrial user that exceeded this limit upon when reviewing the 5-year files. The exceedance did not occur due to normal processes, but was a result of industrial treatment system failures at the industry. The city also evaluated CBOD due to the capability of the plant to treat the extra strength wastewater and the effluent concentrations of this pollutant being well below the current NPDES most stringent requirements. It was eliminated as a pollutant of concern and will not have a pollutant limitation. The city was required to evaluate hexavalent chromium due to the low levels of this pollutant that enter the wastewater plant and the low levels in the sludge. It was also eliminated as a pollutant of concern and will not have a pollutant limitation. For chromium, the proposed limit for chromium is 15.41 milligrams per liter. The limiting criterion is based on activated sludge / nitrification inhibition. The limit for chromium is slightly reduced from the current limit of 16.5 milligrams per liter. Upon a 5-year file review, there were 2 instances where industries exceeded this limit. Exceedances did not occur during their normal processes, but as a result of treatment system failures. For copper, the proposed limit is 2.49 milligrams per liter. The limiting criterion is based on activated sludge / nitrification inhibition. This is comparable to the current limit of 2.27 milligrams per liter. Please note that the limit developed for copper is more stringent than the categorical limit of 3.38 milligrams per liter for those industries subject to 40 CFR 433.15 and 40 CFR 433.17. Upon a 5-year file review, there were 9 instances with 3 industries where the proposed copper limit was exceeded. Again, exceedances did not occur during their normal processes, but as a result of the each respective industry's treatment system failures. There has been a change in local limits development for cyanide. The city now has determined local limits for both free cyanide and total cyanide. This is the change from the current local limits, and that there is now a free cyanide limitation as well as required by the NPDES permit. Previous local limits determinations did not differentiate between total cyanide and free cyanide. Proposed limit for free cyanide is 0.94 milligrams per liter. The limiting criterion is based on pass-through of the plant. The proposed limit for total cyanide is 11.1 milligrams per liter. The limiting criterion is also based on pass-through of the plant. Upon the 5-year file review, there were no industries that exceeded either of those proposed limits. The proposed limit for lead is 8.36 milligrams per liter. The limiting criterion at the plant is based on pass-through of the wastewater at the wastewater facility. Although this is reduced from the previous limit of 63.46 milligrams per liter, there have been no industrial users that have exceeded this proposed limit based upon the 5-year file review. For mercury, the proposed limit is 0.0109 milligrams per liter. The limiting criteria, the plant is based on pass-through of the wastewater facility. Based upon the 5-year file review, no industrial users have exceeded this proposed limit. The proposed limit for molybdenum is 12.53. The limiting criterion at the plant is based on 503 sludge regulations. Although this is reduced from the previous limit of 79.05 milligrams per liter, there were no industrial users that exceeded the proposed limit upon the 5-year file review. The proposed limit for nickel is 11.18 milligrams per liter. The limiting criterion at the plant is based on inhibition limits criterion of the wastewater facility. Based upon the 5-year file review, there are no industrial users which exceeded this proposed limit. The city was required to evaluate selenium due to the low levels of this pollutant that enter the wastewater plant or are in the sludge. It was eliminated as a pollutant of concern and will not have a pollutant limitation. The proposed limit for silver is 0.29 milligrams per liter. The limiting criterion at the plant is based on pass-through of this pollutant at the plant. Although this was reduced from the previous limit of 0.548 milligrams per liter, there have been no industrial users that exceeded this proposed limit based upon the 5-year file review. The city also evaluated total suspended solids. Due to the capability of the plant to treat this extra strength wastewater and the effluent concentrations of this pollutant being well below the current NPDES permit's most stringent requirements, it was eliminated as a pollutant of concern and will not have a pollutant limitation. The proposed limit for zinc is 3.4 milligrams per liter. The limiting criterion at the plant is based on inhibition criterion at the wastewater treatment plant. Based upon the 5-year file review, there were no industrial users which exceeded this proposed limit. The proposed limitation for total phosphorus remains the implementation of best management practices. The city encourages all industrial users to continue to reduce phosphorus content in their wastewater discharge through source reduction measures and the implementation of best management practices. Due to this substantial increase in industrial contributions of phosphorus since the removal of the phosphorus narrative limit in 2019, the city may require that an industrial user conduct an investigation for the identification and quantification of sources of phosphorus in the wastewater discharged and to implement measures to prevent, control, or treat phosphorus to the maximum extent practicable. And finally, the proposed limits for both sulfate and sulfide remain best management practices. The city encourages all industrial users to continue to reduce the sulfate and/or sulfide content in their wastewater discharges through source reduction measures and implementation of best management practices. The city will provide guidance on best management practices to industrial users as needed. So where's the city in the local limits approval process? As of this time, the Ohio EPA has issued a public notice for the proposed local limits. Written comments and request for public hearing must be submitted to the Ohio EPA hearing clerk to the address listed by the end of business on Monday, June 26, 2026, in order to be considered a part of the record of proceeding. The city will submit responses to all written comments and final determination of local limits. All questions and responses will be sent to significant industrial users and interested parties, and the city will submit final local limits to the Ohio EPA for approval. This address will also be listed at the end of this presentation. When the Ohio EPA has approved the proposed limits, the city shall give written notice of the revised limits to each significant industrial user and shall publish the revised local limits in the newspaper, the Dayton Daily News, at least 30 days prior to the effective date of the revised limits. The city will also amend all significant industrial users' industrial wastewater discharge permits and the industrial wastewater zero discharge permits to include the revised limits no later than 4 months after the Ohio EPA final approval. For this permit modification and all future permit modifications, please be sure to review the following. The cover letter itself, it includes the industry name, the updated permit number, the effective start date for the requirements of the permit, and any other changes to the permit. The fact sheet. Review the fact sheet to detail whether there are any changes, modifications to be made. These would include, but are not limited to, any updates to processes, pretreatment, the volumes of wastewater discharged, and personnel, including contact persons and authorized representatives. If there are updates to be made, submit them to the industrial pretreatment office so the fact sheet can be changed to the most current information. Also, review the permit for any changes. To specifically review the monitoring requirement, including the parameters and the monitoring frequency. If they have changed, be sure to convey this information to your contracted sample collectors and/or the laboratory that analyzes the samples prior to the effective date of the permit requirements. The monitoring requirements for the user may be implemented if dictated by the new permit modification. So with that, we'll switch gears and now talk about updates and changes to the city's industrial pretreatment program. State and federal pretreatment updates. Dental Effluent Guidelines. The Dental Effluent Guidelines, 40 CFR Part 441, which establishes regulations for mercury discharges from dental offices, was promulgated and effective July 14, 2017. Its purpose is to reduce discharges of mercury from dental offices to the collection system. Starting in 2017, the city identified all dental offices in its service area that may be subject to the rule. Dental offices in this jurisdiction may have been required to submit a one-time compliance report for dental discharges with amalgam process wastewater, dental discharges without amalgam process wastewater, or dental discharges exempt from the requirements of 40 CFR Part 441, depending upon their status. So also hazardous waste pharmaceuticals rule. The hazardous waste pharmaceuticals rule, or 40 CFR Part 266.505, was made effective on August 21st, 2019. This rule prohibits the discharge of any hazardous pharmaceutical waste or DEA-controlled substances into the sanitary sewer, so no disposal down the drain and no flushing. The city has notified all affected businesses of the obligation under 40 CFR Part 266, Standards for Management of Specific Hazardous Waste. And finally, perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS. The forever chemicals, perfluoro and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS for simplicity's sake, are a group of man-made chemicals used in consumer and industrial processes. Currently, there are no federal guidelines for PFAS. However, the US EPA suggested recommendations for NPDES permit riders, i.e. the Ohio EPA, as detailed in their Emerging Limits Plan 15 report. The draft plan from the EPA includes plans to initiate a POTW influence study of PFAS, which will focus on collecting nationwide data on industrial discharges of PFAS to POTWs, including categories recently reviewed, to both verify sources of PFAS wastewater and to discover new PFAS wastewater sources. Method development for PFAS substances is still ongoing. The EPA method 1633 for PFAS and EPA method 1621, the screening method to measure organofluorine compounds from PFAS and non-PFAS fluorinated compounds, are still in draft form and are scheduled to be completed by 2023, this year. Also, the EPA is seeking approval to develop an industry questionnaire to be sent to industries which may have PFAS containing chemicals at present or historically have had it. This is the information collection request and sampling strategy. More information may be obtained on the on the EPA government website, www.epa.gov/PFAS. At this time, there are no changes to your permit requirements. However, there may be regulatory updates which may require your facility to conduct best management practices, implement source reduction methods, or change monitoring requirements. The city will inform all SIUs of regulatory changes as more information becomes available. On March 14th, the Ohio EPA conducted a complete audit of the city's industrial pretreatment program. There are some items of note that were indicated. There's some updates to the language needed in the sewer use ordinance to make it more in line with the Ohio EPA streamlining requirements and future changes to the pretreatment program. One of the changes to the pretreatment program will include electronic data submittal of required reports, the monthly and quarterly reports that you submit to the city. This inclusion will require a change to the pretreatment information software system, EPA approval, and updates to the sewer use ordinance. We anticipate that this change will occur no earlier than late 2024, but most likely in 2025. More information will be made available to SIUs at a future date of these changes. Additional updates to the city's industrial pretreatment program include the startup of the virtual quarterly industrial training sessions. The City of Dayton's Industrial Pretreatment Office has been looking at ways to improve our program and to aid in communicating relevant topics to our industrial customers. One such way is to conduct quarterly meetings and training sessions for interested parties. The meetings are not required, however, they may be helpful for all industrial users in our program. The meetings will be held virtually and will be recorded for future viewing. They may be used to provide answers to common issues that are encountered in the program and as a training aid for those new to the program. The first virtual meeting was held on April 14th, 2023 on the topic of filling out the PRCC. The recording is now available to the city's website, the www.daytonohio.gov. Look under the industrial pretreatment program on the website. Be sure to contact the industrial pretreatment office if you have any pretreatment topics that you are interested in for one of these virtual training sessions. Now we open this presentation up for questions. If you don't have a microphone, please type your question using the chat feature. Let's make sure. I cannot unmute everyone, so you might have to, if there's any questions, then please unmute your microphone and ask a question. Or if you don't have the ability to do that, you can ask the question under the chat feature for the Teams meeting. I don't seem to have any questions at this time, so we'll proceed.
Yes, hi, Bill with Malt Products. I was just
Oh,
curious,
yes.
are we going to get a copy of this presentation?
Yes, the
Can we?
presentation will be sent to each of the participants after the meeting is completed, and
Okay,
it will also be available on the website.
right. I also noticed that through the presentation you had under TSS that you weren't really checking it anymore. Um,
No, actually, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, please go ahead. I might have misunderstood it. What were you going to
We, that was never, we have, for local limits development, we do not have a local limits, a local limit for that. Now, there may be specific industries that are under surcharge, the surcharge program. That's a little bit different than a local limit.
say? Okay,
So if you're in the surcharge program, or if you have specific limitations on your permit that state you have to
okay,
that you have to analyze for that, either
okay,
TSS or for BOD, then those will continue.
okay. I was just curious.
Oh, yes. Are there any other questions? I'll wait one more minute. Again, if you don't have a microphone, please feel free to type your question using the chat feature on the Teams meeting. Just, okay, in summary, please remember to sign in on the available form if you've not already done so. This form is available in the chat section. There should be a sign-in sheet that's available on that. A link to the presentation will be sent to each participant and will also be linked to the city's water website. And again, written comments about the proposed local limits must be sent to the Ohio EPA hearing clerk at the address listed by the end of the business day on Monday, June 26th, 2023. I'll leave this up here in case you needed to get this address. Okay. And I'd like to thank you so much for attending the City of Dayton's 2023 Virtual Pretreatment Advisory Group meeting. If you have any questions about the industrial pretreatment program, please don't hesitate to contact either Andrea Moore or Ines Pryor via email, telephone, if you have any questions at all. And again, please don't forget to sign in to the presentation so the presentation can be sent to your attention. And again, thank you for attending this virtual meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stop recording.